Claire Whitmore never planned to hear the truth. Lying motionless in her wrecked car, pretending to be unconscious after the crash, the cold, untouchable CEO heard her assistant's voice break for the first time. Daniel Hayes wasn't talking to his boss anymore. He was talking to the woman he'd loved in silence for years, about raising his daughter alone, about knowing he would never be enough, about loving someone so far above his world. Claire kept her eyes closed because waking up meant everything would change. The sound came first, metal screaming against metal, glass fracturing into 1,000 crystalline shards. The world tilting sideways, then spinning, then nothing. Claire Whitmore's last conscious thought before impact was irritation. She'd been reviewing quarterly projections on her phone while her driver navigated evening traffic. The numbers weren't meeting expectations. Revenue growth had plateaued. She needed to schedule another board meeting, push harder, demand more. Then the truck ran the red light. The collision folded reality. Her body lurched against the seatbelt. Her phone flew from her hands. The carefully controlled world of spreadsheets and strategic plans dissolved into chaos and the sharp chemical smell of airbags deploying. When awareness returned, it came slowly, like surfacing from deep water. Claire registered sensations before thoughts. The metallic taste of blood in her mouth, the pressure of deflated airbags against her chest, the odd angle of the back seat where she'd been thrown. Her eyes remained closed, not from injury, not from pain, but from instinct. The same instinct that had carried her through hostile boardrooms and cutthroat negotiations for a decade. When you don't know the situation, you gather information first. You listen. You wait. So Claire stayed perfectly still, her breathing shallow, while voices approached the wreckage. "Someone call 911. Is she alive? Don't move her. Wait for paramedics." Strangers. Concerned strangers who would forget her face by tomorrow. Claire's mind began running diagnostics. Her fingers could flex. Her toes could move. Nothing felt broken, though her left shoulder throbbed where the seatbelt had caught her. Concussion, maybe. Bruising, certainly. But survivable. She was about to open her eyes when she heard it. "Claire!" Daniel's voice. Raw, terrified, stripped of every professional boundary. Her assistant shouldn't have been here. He'd left the office an hour before her, heading home to his daughter. But somehow he was here, and he was shoving through the crowd with a desperation that made Claire's chest tighten. "Ma'am, you can't. That's my boss." Claire. Footsteps crunched over broken glass. Then hands Daniel's hands. She knew them somehow. Knew the careful way they handled documents. The slight callus on his right thumb from holding pens were touching her face, checking for a pulse at her throat. "God, please, please be okay." The raw prayer in his voice made Claire's decision for her. She kept her eyes closed, kept her body limp, because something in Daniel's tone told her that if she woke now, she'd never hear what he sounded like when he thought no one was listening. "Ambulance is 2 minutes out," someone called. Daniel's hand found hers. His fingers wrapped around her palm, and Claire felt the slight tremor running through them. In 3 years of working together, she'd never known Daniel Hayes to shake. He was steady, reliable, the one person in her company who anticipated her needs before she voiced them, who worked late without complaint, who never demanded recognition. She'd promoted him to executive assistant because he was invisible in the best way, competent without ego, present without being intrusive. But there was nothing invisible about the way he was holding her hand now. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're going to be fine. You have to be fine." His thumb traced circles on her knuckles, an unconscious gesture, intimate in a way that transcended their professional relationship. Claire's heart rate spiked. She knew he'd feel her pulse quicken beneath his fingers, but he seemed to interpret it as distress rather than awareness. "It's okay," he murmured. "Help is coming. Just hold on." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The crowd around the wreckage shifted, making space for emergency responders. But Daniel didn't let go of her hand. "Sir, we need you to step back." "I'm her emergency contact," Daniel said. The lie came so smoothly that Claire almost believed it herself. I'm not leaving. A pause. Then, all right. But stay out of our way. Paramedics swarmed the vehicle. Hands checked her vitals. Lights flashed across her closed eyelids. Someone fitted a neck brace around her throat. The professional efficiency should have been reassuring. But all Claire could focus on was Daniel's presence beside her, his hand never leaving hers. Vitals are stable, a paramedic announced. Pupils responsive. Possible concussion. We're transporting to Memorial. They maneuvered a backboard beneath her with practiced precision. The motion jostled her injured shoulder, and Claire had to concentrate to keep from flinching. Play the part. Stay unconscious. Because something told her that if she woke up now, Daniel would retreat behind his professional mask, and she'd never know what he really thought, what he really felt. I'm riding with her, Daniel said. Family only. I told you, I'm her emergency contact. Check her employee file if you don't believe me. Another pause. Claire could imagine the paramedic's skepticism, but apparently Daniel's conviction won out. Fine. But stay seated and don't interfere. They loaded her into the ambulance. The doors slammed shut. The siren wailed, and in the enclosed space, with only the paramedic focused on checking her IV and Daniel sitting beside her stretcher, Claire heard him speak again. Quieter now. Almost to himself. I should have stayed late tonight. I should have driven you home. I knew you'd work until dark. I knew you'd be tired. And I left anyway, because Emma had that science project due and I'm all she has, and I can't. His voice cracked. Claire's chest constricted. In 3 years, she'd never heard Daniel mention why he always left exactly at 5:30. She'd assumed it was principle, a boundary, proof that even her most dedicated employee had limits. She'd never considered it might be necessity. If something happens to you, Daniel continued, the words spilling out like a confession. God, Claire, you don't know. You can't know. But if I lose you, the paramedic glanced over, then tactfully returned his attention to the monitors. Daniel's hand tightened around hers. I know I'm just your assistant. I know you probably don't even think about me outside of work, but every morning when you walk into that office, every time you trust me with something important, every rare moment when you almost smile at one of my terrible jokes, he exhaled shakily. Those are the moments I live for. Claire's mind reeled. This wasn't happening. Daniel Hayes, efficient, professional, carefully neutral. Daniel Hayes was confessing feelings while she lay unconscious in an ambulance, and she couldn't respond. Couldn't reassure him. Couldn't do anything but listen as her entire understanding of their relationship shattered and reformed into something new, something terrifying. We're approaching the hospital, the paramedic announced. Daniel fell silent, but his hand remained wrapped around hers, anchor and lifeline, all the way to the emergency room doors. They transferred her to a hospital bed. Doctors conducted examinations with brisk efficiency. Claire kept her breathing steady, her body relaxed, while medical professionals discussed her condition as if she weren't there, which, she supposed, they believed she wasn't. Not really. Not consciously. Concussion, definitely. Some bruising. No internal bleeding that we can detect. We'll monitor her overnight. Run a full scan in the morning. When will she wake up? Daniel's voice. Strained. Could be hours, could be minutes. Head injuries are unpredictable. But her vitals are strong. I'd say she's just resting now, letting her body recover from the shock. Footsteps retreated. A curtain swished closed. And then it was just Claire and Daniel in the dimly lit emergency bay, separated from the rest of the ward by thin fabric and the steady beep of monitoring equipment. She heard him pull a chair close to her bedside, heard him exhale slowly, like he'd been holding his breath. They say you can hear people when you're like this, Daniel said quietly. I don't know if that's true. Maybe it's just something they tell us so we don't feel so helpless. He was silent for a moment. Claire resisted the urge to squeeze his hand, to give any sign that yes, she could hear him. That every word was carving itself into her memory. I need to call Emma's babysitter, Daniel continued. Let her know I'll be late. But I can't. I can't leave yet. Not until I know you're okay. Emma. The daughter. Claire filed the name away, feeling guilty that she'd never asked. In 3 years of working together, she'd never inquired about Daniel's life outside the office. She knew he had a child because of the occasional phone call he took with an apologetic expression, because of the way he never scheduled morning meetings before 9 or evening meetings after 5. But she'd never asked her name, never asked her age, never demonstrated even basic curiosity about the person who shaped Daniel's entire existence. "She's 8, Daniel said, as if reading Claire's thoughts. "Smart as hell, stubborn, too. Gets that from her mother." His voice softened on those last words, became reverent and sad in equal measure. Laura died 4 years ago. Cancer. By the time they caught it, there was nothing they could do except make her comfortable. Claire's heart clenched. She'd hired Daniel Hayes 3 years ago, which meant, "I was drowning," Daniel continued. Hospital bills, funeral costs. A 4-year-old who didn't understand why Mommy wasn't coming home. I was working 2 jobs and still couldn't keep up with the debt. Then I saw your listing, executive assistant position. The salary was God. It was more than I'd made in a year at both jobs combined. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I almost didn't apply. Figured someone like you wouldn't hire someone like me. High school diploma. Community college dropout. No fancy credentials. But Emma needed stability. She needed a father who could be present, not someone working himself to death just to make rent. Claire remembered the interview. Daniel had been nervous but composed. His resume was thin on formal education but rich in practical experience. He'd answered her questions with quiet intelligence, and when she'd described the demands of the position, long hours, high pressure, constant availability, he'd met her eyes and said, "I'll work harder than anyone you've ever hired, and I'll never let you down." He'd kept that promise. For 3 years, he'd been the one constant in her chaotic professional life. "You hired me on the spot," Daniel said. "Do you remember? I thought I'd have to interview for weeks, compete with dozens of other candidates. But you looked at me and said, 'When can you start?' Like it was that simple." It had been simple. Claire had built her career on reading people, on identifying talent beneath surface presentations. Daniel Hayes had something none of the overqualified candidates possessed: genuine need. And people who needed something worked harder to keep it. Cold logic, but effective. Except now, listening to Daniel's voice in the darkness, Claire wondered if there had been something else. Some unconscious recognition. Some instinct that said, "This person matters." "You saved us," Daniel said softly. "I know you probably don't see it that way. To you, I was just another employee. A good investment. But to me, to Emma, you were everything. Steady paycheck, health insurance, the ability to take her to the doctor without bankrupting us, to buy her new shoes when she outgrew the old ones, to take a night off and read her bedtime stories without falling asleep from exhaustion." His hand tightened around hers. "You gave me my daughter back, and I've spent 3 years trying to find a way to repay that debt, trying to be worth what you gave me, but I can't." His voice broke. "I can't repay it by falling in love with you." Claire's breath caught. She covered it by letting out a small, unconscious sound, the kind of noise someone truly asleep might make. But internally, her mind was screaming. "I know," Daniel continued, voice ragged. "I know how wrong it is. You're my boss. You're brilliant and powerful, and so far out of my league it's laughable. But every day I watch you command rooms full of people twice your age. I watch you make impossible decisions. I watch you carry the weight of 1,000 employees on your shoulders and never complain, never falter." He exhaled shakily. "And I think, who takes care of you? Who makes sure you eat lunch? Who notices when you're running on 3 hours of sleep? Who tells you it's okay to go home?" "Me," Claire thought. "You do. I try to help in the small ways I can," Daniel said. "Coffee how you like it. Files organized before you ask. pushing back on meetings when I can see you're exhausted. But it's not enough. It's never enough, because at the end of the day, I'm still just the assistant, the employee, the single dad who can't even work past 5:30 because he has a daughter who needs him. You're not just anything, Claire wanted to say, but she kept her eyes closed, kept her breathing steady. I know I'll never be enough for you, Daniel said quietly. I know that someday you'll meet someone on your level, someone who can match your brilliance, someone who can give you the life you deserve, and I'll be happy for you. I will, because you deserve everything. His thumb traced circles on her knuckles again. But right now, in this moment, I need you to know something, even if you never hear it. Even if you wake up and everything goes back to normal and we never speak of this again. He leaned closer. Claire could feel his breath against her ear. I love you, Claire Whitmore. I love your determination and your standards and the way you pretend not to notice when I bring Emma to the office on school holidays. I love how you remember everyone's names, how you fight for your employees even when it costs you, how you never ask anyone to do something you wouldn't do yourself. His voice dropped to a whisper. And I love that you have no idea how extraordinary you are, that you think success is the only thing that matters, that you've built walls so high around your heart that you can't see who's been standing at the gate for 3 years, hoping you'll let him in. Tears burned behind Claire's closed eyelids. She couldn't respond, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but lie there and let Daniel's words reshape everything she thought she knew about her life. Okay, Daniel said, his voice returning to something resembling composure. Okay, I said it. Even if you never know, at least I said it. He stood. Claire heard him move toward the curtain. I need to call Emma. But I'll be back, I promise. I'm not leaving you here alone. His footsteps faded, and Claire lay in the hospital bed, eyes still closed, while silent tears slipped down her cheeks. Daniel returned 20 minutes later with coffee that smelled like hospital vending machines and resignation. Claire had used the time alone to get her emotions under control, to wipe away the tears with small, controlled movements she hoped would look like unconscious twitching, to rebuild the armor she'd worn for so long it felt like skin. But when she heard Daniel sink back into the chair beside her bed, when she felt him take her hand again like it was the most natural thing in the world, the armor cracked. Emma says hi, Daniel said softly. She wanted me to tell you she hopes you feel better. She's drawing you a get well card. She draws cards for everything. Birthday cards, thank you cards, random Tuesday cards because she felt like it. Affection saturated his voice. She got that from Laura. My wife, she was an art teacher. Elementary school. She could make anything beautiful. Give her some construction paper and safety scissors and she'd create masterpieces. He was quiet for a moment, remembering. We met young. Too young, probably. I was 19, working construction to save money for college. She was 21, just graduated, full of dreams about inspiring kids. We probably shouldn't have worked, but his thumb resumed those small circles on Claire's hand. She made me believe in things. In possibilities. She looked at a high school dropout with calloused hands and saw potential. Saw someone worth building a life with. Claire's chest ached. She'd never heard such naked love in someone's voice. We were married 6 months after we met. Everyone said we were crazy, that it wouldn't last. But we proved them wrong. We had 4 good years, 4 years of laughter and terrible apartment living and dreams about the future. His voice grew heavier. Then Emma came along. Unplanned, but so wanted. Laura glowed when she was pregnant. She painted the entire nursery herself, covered the walls in storybook characters. Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, the Velveteen Rabbit. She wanted Emma to grow up, surrounded by magic. Daniel exhaled slowly. Emma was 2 when Laura got sick, started with fatigue. Laura kept saying she was just tired from chasing a toddler around. Then she started losing weight. Then came the pain. Claire could hear the nightmare unfolding in his carefully controlled tone. Ovarian cancer. Stage 4 by the time they diagnosed it. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 8 through sheer stubbornness because she wasn't ready to leave Emma. Wasn't ready to leave me alone with a toddler and no idea how to braid hair. He laughed, but it sounded like glass breaking. She made lists. Detailed lists. How to handle Emma's tantrums. What books to read at bedtime. How to make her favorite meals. She recorded herself reading stories so Emma would have her voice. She wrote letters for every birthday until Emma turned 18. Tears were flowing freely down Claire's face now, but Daniel couldn't see them in the dim light. Couldn't see how his story was unraveling her. The hospital bills were crushing, Daniel continued. Even with insurance, the costs, experimental treatments, specialists, medications, I sold everything. Our car, Laura's art supplies, the furniture her grandmother left her. It wasn't enough. His voice dropped. I was working 16-hour days while Laura was dying, missing her last lucid moments because I was framing houses to pay for medication that wasn't working. And when it was over, I had a 4-year-old, $200,000 in debt, and no idea how to survive. The next 2 years I don't even remember most of it. I worked myself numb, took any job I could get, left Emma with babysitters who barely spoke English. I was present physically, but absent everywhere else, just trying to keep us afloat. He paused. Then, one day, Emma's preschool teacher called me in for a conference. Said Emma was struggling, acting out, drawing pictures of her mother as an angel and her father as an empty space. The teacher looked at me and said, "Your daughter doesn't need money. She needs her dad." Daniel's voice roughened with emotion. "That's when I saw your job listing. And I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is how I get Emma back. How I become the father Laura trusted me to be." He squeezed Claire's hand. "You didn't just hire me, Claire. You gave me a life. You gave me flexibility when Emma was sick. You didn't ask questions when I needed to leave early for school plays. And that one time," he stopped, started again. "That one time when Emma had pneumonia and I was out of sick days and terrified I'd lose my job, you came to my desk and said, 'Family comes first, Daniel. Always.' Like it was obvious. Like it wasn't a weakness to choose your child over career advancement." Claire remembered. She'd been harsh about it, hadn't wanted to appear soft, but she'd meant every word. "I've never told you this," Daniel said quietly, "but after that day, Emma asked who my boss was. I showed her your picture from the company website, and she said that you saved people without them even knowing." He leaned back in the chair, exhaustion clear in his posture. "Emma draws you sometimes, in her pictures. You're usually wearing a cape. I should probably tell her to stop before it gets weird, but I can't. Because to us, you are a superhero. You're the reason Emma has a father who can read bedtime stories. The reason she has birthday parties and new shoes and a stable home." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "You're the reason I could survive losing the love of my life. Because you gave me something to build toward, a way to honor Laura's memory by being the dad she believed I could be." Silence settled over the hospital bay. The monitors beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a patient coughed, and Claire lay still, her heart breaking and mending simultaneously, understanding for the first time what her cold efficiency had meant to someone who needed it. Claire spent the next hour trapped in her own mind, while Daniel dozed in the chair beside her bed, his hand still loosely holding hers. She could have woken up then. Should have. But her thoughts were a tangle of revelation and reckoning, and she needed time to process what she'd learned, what she'd heard, what it meant. Daniel Hayes loved her. The quiet, competent assistant who organized her life loved her. The single father who left every day at 5:30 to pick up his daughter loved her. The man who brought her coffee and remembered her appointments and stood between her and the chaos of corporate demands loved her. And she, Claire forced herself to confront the question she'd been avoiding. What did she feel? She'd spent 10 years building Whitmore Industries from a startup to a major player. 10 years of 18-hour days and sacrificed weekends and relationships that withered from neglect. She'd convinced herself that success was enough. that reaching the top would fill the hollow space in her chest. It hadn't. Claire was 42 years old, wealthy beyond measure, and desperately, crushingly alone. Oh, she had friends. Professional acquaintances, people she met for strategic lunches or networking events, but no one who knew her. Really knew her. The parts beneath the power suits and quarterly earnings. When was the last time someone had touched her without agenda? When was the last time someone had looked at her and seen Claire, not the CEO? Daniel saw her. The realization hit like a second collision. Daniel, who made sure she ate lunch. Daniel, who pushed back on meetings when he could see her exhaustion. Daniel, who once brought her cold medicine when she refused to take a sick day, setting it on her desk without comment because he knew she wouldn't accept overt care. He'd been taking care of her for 3 years, and she'd been too focused on spreadsheets to notice. No, that wasn't entirely true. Claire had noticed. She'd just categorized it, filed it under efficient employee and professional excellence, because acknowledging it as something else would mean confronting how empty her life had become. She'd made herself untouchable, unreachable. The Ice Queen CEO who intimidated board members and made grown men stammer during presentations. It was armor, protection, a way to survive in spaces that didn't want women at the top, but it was also a prison. Claire thought about her penthouse apartment. Pristine, expensive, silent. She decorated it with the help of an interior designer who'd asked what style she preferred and seemed baffled when Claire said she didn't know. The designer had created something sleek and modern and utterly impersonal. A space that looked like a magazine spread but felt like a hotel room. Claire couldn't remember the last time she'd had company there. The last time she'd cooked a meal or watched television or done anything except collapse into bed before waking up to do it all again. Was this success? Was this what she'd sacrificed everything to achieve? She thought about Daniel's daughter, Emma, 8 years old, drawing superhero cards, living in an apartment that probably couldn't fit in Claire's closet but felt more like home than anywhere Claire had been in years. She thought about Laura, the art teacher who'd married young and died young but had left behind love letters and recorded stories and a family that still felt her presence. What would Claire leave behind? A company? Quarterly reports? A reputation for ruthless efficiency? Who would sit beside her hospital bed and confess that they'd loved her in silence? The answer made her throat tight. No one. If something had happened to her today, if the crash had been worse, if she'd actually been unconscious or worse, Daniel would have called 911. Maybe her board members would have sent flowers. The business press would have written obituaries praising her contributions to the industry. And then life would have moved on. Someone else would take her position. Her apartment would be sold. Her carefully constructed empire would continue without her. She'd be gone, and the world would barely ripple. The thought was clarifying in its brutality. Claire Whitmore had spent 10 years building a legacy of profit margins and market share. But she'd neglected to build a life, to create connections that mattered beyond quarterly earnings, to let anyone close enough to see the person beneath the title, until tonight, when a car crash and a desperate confession had shattered her carefully maintained distance. She could go back to normal. Wake up, pretend she'd heard nothing. Let Daniel retreat behind professional boundaries. Continue the dance they'd performed for 3 years, where he anticipated her needs, and she pretended not to see him as anything more than an extremely competent assistant. It would be safe, familiar. It would also be a lie, because Claire did see him. Had seen him, maybe, from the beginning. But seeing and acknowledging were different things. One was passive observation. The other required vulnerability, and vulnerability terrified her more than any hostile takeover. But lying here in the darkness, listening to Daniel's soft breathing as he dozed beside her, Claire realized something fundamental. If she died tonight, her biggest regret wouldn't be leaving her company. It would be never telling Daniel Hayes that he wasn't just her assistant, that, somewhere in the last 3 years, between perfectly timed coffee deliveries and gentle reminders to take care of herself, he'd become necessary. Essential, the The one person who made the crushing pressure of her job bearable because he understood, because he cared, because he saw past Claire Whitmore, CEO, to Claire Whitmore, woman. And he loved her anyway. She couldn't give him back what he'd lost, couldn't replace Laura or the years of struggle. But maybe she could give him something else, something she'd been withholding from everyone for a decade, herself. Real and flawed and uncertain, the thought was terrifying. It was also, Claire realized, the first thing that had felt right in years. She took a careful breath, then another, testing whether her body was ready to stop performing unconsciousness. Daniel stirred in his chair. His hand tightened reflexively around hers, checking even in sleep that she was still there. Claire's heart turned over. She could do this. She could be brave about something other than business. She could take a risk that had nothing to do with profit margins, and everything to do with the hollow ache in her chest that she'd been ignoring for far too long. But not yet. Not here. In a hospital bay with fluorescent lights and monitoring equipment, and the weight of Daniel's confession still settling into her bones. First, she needed to navigate whatever came next. The doctors, the questions, the practical logistics of recovery. Then, if she didn't lose her nerve, she would figure out how to tell Daniel Hayes that she'd heard every word, and that maybe, possibly, impossibly, she might feel the same way. Claire opened her eyes slowly, letting them adjust to the dim lighting of the hospital bay. She blinked, making small, disoriented movements that would seem natural for someone emerging from unconsciousness. Daniel jerked awake in the chair beside her. "Claire?" His voice was rough with sleep and sudden alertness. "Oh, thank God. How do you feel?" Claire turned her head carefully, genuinely testing for pain. Her shoulder throbbed. Her neck was stiff from the brace. "But otherwise, like I was in a car accident," she said, her voice hoarse. "Realistic. What happened?" Daniel leaned forward, his professional mask sliding back into place so smoothly that Claire's chest ached. This was what he did. Who he was with her during daylight. Competent, composed, carefully neutral. "Truck ran a red light," he explained. "Hit your car broadside. You've been unconscious for about 3 hours. The doctors say you have a concussion, some bruising, but nothing serious." 3 hours? Claire frowned. "How did you—" "I heard about the accident on the police scanner app." The lie came easily, too easily. Daniel had clearly prepared this answer. "I was still nearby, picking up Emma from her after-school program. I got here as fast as I could." Claire studied him, noted the tension around his eyes, the way his hands were carefully folded in his lap instead of reaching for hers, the professional distance he'd reestablished. Everything she'd heard felt like a dream. Except it wasn't. It had been real and raw and completely at odds with the man sitting beside her now. "Thank you for coming," Claire said softly. "You didn't have to." "Of course I did." Daniel's expression didn't waver. "You're my boss." And he hesitated, then added, "We're colleagues. I'd do the same for anyone from the office." The words landed like small cuts. Claire knew he was protecting himself, protecting both of them. But hearing him categorize her as just another colleague after his earlier confession felt deliberately painful. She could call him on it. Could say, "I heard you. I heard everything." But that would be cruel in its own way, would force a confrontation here. Now, when Daniel was exhausted and vulnerable, and she was wearing a hospital gown with a neck brace. "So instead," Claire said, "still, I appreciate it." A nurse pushed through the curtain, clipboard in hand. She took one look at Claire's open eyes and smiled professionally. "Welcome back, Miss Whitmore. I'm Nurse Patterson. How are you feeling?" "Like I need about a gallon of water and possibly some painkillers. We can arrange that." Nurse Patterson began checking vitals, asking standard questions about Claire's pain levels, whether she knew where she was, what year it was. Claire answered patiently, aware of Daniel sitting quietly in the corner, watching. "Everything looks good," Nurse Patterson finally declared. "The doctor will want to do a full examination in the morning. Run some scans. We're keeping you overnight for observation. When can I leave? Probably tomorrow afternoon if the scans are clear. But you'll need someone to stay with you for the first 48 hours. Concussion protocol. No being alone, no driving, no screens." Claire's jaw tightened. "I'll hire a nurse. A family member or close friend is preferable. Someone who knows you, who can watch for warning signs." "I don't have." Claire stopped. She'd been about to say she didn't have anyone. The truth sitting bare and ugly in the sterile hospital air. "I'll make arrangements." Nurse Patterson nodded, clearly used to difficult patients, and left to get the promised water and painkillers. Silence settled over the bay. "I can stay tonight," Daniel offered quietly. "In the waiting room." "In case you need anything." "Absolutely not. You have Emma." "The babysitter can handle tonight." "Daniel?" Claire made her voice firm. CEO voice, the one that didn't accept argument. "Go home to your daughter. I'm fine." He looked like he wanted to argue. But he was too well trained, too accustomed to accepting her decisions, to push back. "All right," he said finally. "That's not non-negotiable." Daniel stood, and for just a moment, Claire saw past his professional mask to the man beneath. The one who'd held her hand in the ambulance, who'd confessed his love in the darkness. "I'll be here at 7. He left before she could argue further, and Claire lay in the hospital bed, alone with monitoring equipment and the ghost of words he'd never meant for her to hear. Daniel returned at exactly 7 the next morning, as promised. Claire was already awake. She'd slept poorly, kept conscious by hospital noises and the replay of Daniel's confession in her mind. He brought coffee. Real coffee from the shop 3 blocks from the office that Claire preferred but never had time to visit herself. The gesture was so perfectly Daniel that Claire had to look away to hide the sudden emotion. "Thank you," she said, accepting the cup. "You remembered. I always remember." The words were simple, but weighted with meaning. Daniel probably didn't intend to reveal. They sat in careful silence while Claire sipped coffee and Daniel pretended to check emails on his phone. The distance between them felt physical, tangible, like the 3 feet separating her hospital bed from his chair might as well be miles. The doctor arrived at 8 for the promised examination and scans. Everything came back clear, no internal injuries, no complications, just bruising and a concussion that would heal with rest. "You're cleared to leave this afternoon," the doctor said. "But I meant what I said about the 48-hour observation period. You'll need someone with you, someone responsible who can check on you regularly, make sure you're not experiencing delayed symptoms." "I'll arrange for a professional nurse," Claire said. The doctor frowned. "Miss Whitmore, I really recommend a friend or family member. Someone who—" "I'm afraid that's not an option." The doctor glanced at Daniel, clearly assuming he filled that role. Daniel remained carefully neutral, staring at his phone screen. "Well," the doctor said slowly, "it's your choice. But please take this seriously. Concussions can be unpredictable." After the doctor left, Claire began making calls. But apparently, hiring a private nurse on 12 hours' notice was more complicated than anticipated. The services she contacted were either fully booked or couldn't guarantee someone qualified for neurological monitoring. She was on her 4th call when Daniel cleared his throat. "There's another option," he said quietly. Claire lowered her phone. "What?" "Come stay with us, with Emma and me, just for 2 days." Claire stared at him. "Daniel, I know it's unconventional, but Emma and I have space." "Well, not much space, but enough. And I can work from home, keep an eye on you." Emma would. He stopped himself. It would solve the problem. Professionally, nothing about this offer was professional. They both knew it. "I can't impose on your family like that," Claire said. "It's not an imposition." Daniel met her eyes for the first time all morning. "Let me help, please." There were 100 reasons to say no. Boundaries, propriety. The fact that accepting would mean entering Daniel's personal life in a way that would change everything between them. But Claire thought about her empty penthouse, thought about hiring a stranger to watch her like a medical specimen, thought about spending 2 days alone with nothing but her thoughts and the echo of Daniel's confession. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Emma won't mind?" Something flickered in Daniel's expression. Hope. Maybe. Or fear. "Emma will be thrilled. She's been asking about you since I called last night. She made you a card." Of course she did. This 8-year-old Claire had never met, who apparently drew her as a superhero. "Okay," Claire heard herself say. "If you're certain it's not too much trouble." "It's not." Daniel stood quickly, like he was afraid she'd change her mind. "I'll go get the discharge paperwork started. We can leave as soon as you're ready." He left before Claire could reconsider, and she sat alone in the hospital bed, coffee growing cold in her hands, wondering what she'd just agreed to. Daniel's apartment was exactly what Claire expected, and nothing like it at the same time. It was small, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living area that flowed into a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. The furniture was mismatched but clean. Bookshelves lined one wall, packed with children's books and paperbacks, and what looked like Laura's old art supplies stored carefully on the top shelf like a shrine. But what struck Claire most was how alive it felt. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator and half the living room wall, crayon drawings and watercolors, and what appeared to be a series depicting their life in vivid, childish detail. A blanket fort took up one corner. Children's chapter books were stacked beside the couch. It was cluttered and cramped and utterly, completely a home. "I know it's not what you're used to," Daniel said, hovering anxiously by the door while Claire took it all in. "But the couch pulls out into a bed, and I changed the sheets this morning, and it's perfect," Claire said, and meant it. The apartment door burst open, and Emma exploded into the space with the energy only an 8-year-old could muster. "Dad, is she here? Did you bring her?" Emma skidded to a stop when she saw Claire, eyes going wide. She was small for her age, all skinny limbs and wild dark hair pulled into a slightly lopsided ponytail. She wore jeans with grass stains and a t-shirt declaring, "Science is magic." "You're the superhero lady," Emma breathed. Claire blinked. "I'm what?" "From Dad's work. He showed me your picture. You run the whole company." Emma's eyes sparkled with pure admiration. "That's so cool." "Emma," Daniel said gently, "Miss Whitmore isn't feeling well." "Right, sorry." Emma immediately moderated her volume, though her excitement remained palpable. "I made you a card. Want to see?" Before Claire could respond, Emma was shoving construction paper into her hands. The card featured a crayon drawing of Claire, or at least a stick figure with yellow hair and a cape standing triumphantly atop what appeared to be a building. Below, in careful child handwriting, "Get well soon. You're my hero. Love, Emma." Claire's throat tightened. "This is Emma. This is beautiful. Thank you. I used my good markers," Emma said proudly. "The ones that smell like fruit. I can tell. It's very professional." Emma beamed. Then she turned to Daniel. "Can I show her my room? I cleaned it. Later, maybe. Let's give Miss Whitmore time to settle in first." But Claire surprised herself by saying, "I'd love to see your room, Emma. If that's all right." Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. She grabbed Claire's hand carefully, like she understood about the injuries, and tugged her down the short hallway. Emma's room was tiny. A twin bed took up most of the space, covered in a quilt that looked handmade. Artwork covered every available inch of wall. Emma's own creations, mixed with what Claire suspected were Laura's pieces. A small desk held colored pencils and paper. Books were stacked everywhere. "This is where Mom used to read to me," Emma said, pointing to the bed. "Dad does it now, but he uses funny voices." Mom's voices were better. The casual mention of Laura made Claire's chest ache. But Emma didn't seem sad, just matter-of-fact, the way children could be about grief. "I'm sure your dad does his best." Claire said softly. He does. He tries really hard. Emma looked up at Claire with serious eyes. He works a lot because of me. But he always comes to my stuff, like my science fair and my concerts, and when I had to go to the hospital that one time. You went to the hospital? Pneumonia. It was scary. But Dad stayed the whole time. He didn't even go to work. Emma said this with the gravity of someone describing a miracle. He said I was more important, Claire remembered. She remembered Daniel's pale face when he'd requested time off, the way he'd seemed braced for rejection. She'd told him family came first, but she hadn't understood what it meant. She understood now. Your dad loves you very much, Claire said. I know, Emma grinned. He says I'm his favorite person in the whole world, even though sometimes I'm annoying. Despite everything, Claire laughed. I'm sure you're not annoying. I am sometimes. Like when I don't want to go to bed, or when I practice my recorder. Dad says it sounds like a dying goose, but he's joking. Mostly. Daniel appeared in the doorway. Emma, why don't you give Miss Whitmore some space? She needs to rest. But we're talking. I know, sweetie, but it's fine, Claire interrupted. Really? I'm just sitting. Talking is good. Daniel looked uncertain but nodded. Okay, but not too long. And if you need anything, I'll let you know. He retreated, leaving Claire sitting on Emma's bed while the 8-year-old showed her various treasures, a rock collection, a necklace her mother made, a certificate from last year's spelling bee, and Claire, who hadn't spent time with a child since her nephew was born 15 years ago, found herself genuinely engaged. Emma was smart and funny and unguarded in the way children could be before the world taught them to perform. Do you like being a boss? Emma asked suddenly. Yes. Most of the time. Dad says you're really good at it. He says you're the smartest person he knows. Claire's heart skipped. He said that? Uh-huh. He talks about you sometimes. Says you work really hard and help lots of people. Emma tilted her head. Do you have a family? The question was innocent, but it landed like a blow. No, Claire said quietly. I don't. Why not? Emma, Daniel called from the other room, clearly having overheard. That's not an appropriate question, but Claire shook her head. It's okay. I never made time for one, I guess. I was too focused on work. Emma processed this with a child's straightforward logic. That sounds lonely. Emma. It is, Claire admitted. Sometimes it is. Emma studied her for a long moment. Then she patted Claire's hand with surprising gentleness. You can share ours if you want. Dad says friends are chosen family. Something inside Claire cracked wide open. Before she could respond, Daniel appeared in the doorway again, this time holding a bowl of soup. Okay, Emma. That's enough interrogation. Go do your homework. Emma made a face but complied, skipping past her father with a cheerful, Bye, Miss Superhero. Daniel set the soup on Emma's desk. Don't apologize. Claire accepted the soup, noting the homemade smell. She's wonderful. She is. Daniel's expression softened. She's everything good about Laura and nothing bad about me. I doubt that's true. They looked at each other for a moment too long. Then, Daniel cleared his throat. You should eat. Then, sleep. Doctor's orders. Claire nodded. But as Daniel turned to leave, she found herself saying, Thank you. For this. For letting me intrude. You're not intruding. Daniel paused in the doorway. He stopped. Reconsidered. Just rest, he said finally. We'll talk later. And he left Claire sitting in his daughter's room, eating homemade soup, wondering when her carefully controlled life had spun so completely out of her control. That night, Claire lay on the pull-out couch in Daniel's living room, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of domestic life. Daniel reading to Emma, Emma's laughter, water running in the bathroom, the soft click of Emma's bedroom door closing. Then Daniel emerged from the hallway in sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, the most casual Claire had ever seen him. He startled when he saw her awake. "I thought you'd be asleep," he said. "Can't seem to manage it." Claire sat up carefully. "Too much on my mind." Daniel hesitated, then settled into the armchair across from the couch. "How's the pain?" "Manageable. The painkillers help." "Of course. What do you need?" "Water? Another blanket?" "I can." "Daniel." Claire stopped him. "I need to tell you something." Something in her tone made him still. Okay, this was it. The moment she'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure, Claire could retreat, could ask about work or make small talk, could preserve the carefully maintained fiction that she'd been unconscious for the entire ambulance ride and hospital stay. Or she could be brave. "I heard you," she said quietly. "In the ambulance, in the hospital. I wasn't unconscious. Not really. I was aware, and I heard everything you said." The color drained from Daniel's face. "What?" "I'm sorry. I should have said something earlier. But I couldn't. I needed time to process, to understand what it meant." Daniel stood abruptly. "Oh, God. Oh, my God. Claire, let me finish." Claire's voice was gentle but firm. "Please." He froze, looking like he wanted to bolt. "You said you've spent 3 years loving me in silence," Claire continued. 3 years thinking you weren't enough, that you'd never be enough. And I need you to know something." She took a breath. "You're wrong. You're not just my assistant. You're not just anything. You're—" Her voice caught. She forced herself to continue. "You're the person who makes my life work, the person who sees me, really sees me. Not the CEO or the reputation or the quarterly earnings. Just me, Claire, and somewhere in the last 3 years, you became." She couldn't say it. Not yet. But she could offer something else. "I've built this incredible empire," Claire said softly. "Climbed every mountain I set out to climb. And you know what I realized tonight? I did it alone. Completely alone. No family, no real friends, no one who would sit beside my hospital bed and hold my hand. Except you did. You came. You stayed. You." Her throat tightened. "You cared. And I don't know when the last time someone cared about me was. The real me. Not what I could do for them or what value I represented. Just me." Daniel had gone very still. "Claire, I'm 42 years old," she continued, "and I live in an empty apartment that looks like a hotel. I work 18-hour days because going home means facing how lonely I am. I've convinced myself that success is enough, that reaching the top means I've won." She met his eyes. "But then I heard you talking to me in that ambulance. Heard you confess that you love me, that I've been more than a boss to you. And I realized I haven't won anything. I've just built really expensive walls around a really empty life. What are you saying?" Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm saying," Claire took a shaky breath. "I'm saying that I don't know if what I feel is love. I don't know if I even remember what love feels like. But I know that when you hold my hand, I feel less alone. I know that when you bring me coffee, it's the highlight of my day. I know that watching you with Emma tonight made me understand what I've been missing." She stood, moving closer to him. "I know that I want to try, to figure out what this is, what we could be. If you're willing to take that risk with someone who's broken and closed off and probably going to be terrible at this." Daniel stared at her. For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't speak. Then he said, "You're not broken, Daniel. You're not." His voice was fierce. "You're careful, protected. But you're not broken. And I don't need you to be anything other than what you are." He stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I fell in love with the woman who remembers everyone's names, who fights for her employees, who pretended not to notice when I brought Emma to the office on holidays but had coloring books waiting in the conference room, who works herself to exhaustion because she cares, even when she pretends she doesn't." His hand reached up, hovering near her face but not quite touching. I don't need you to be perfect, Claire. I just need you to be real. Claire felt tears threatening. I don't know how to do this. How to be someone's. She struggled for words. I've never. We'll figure it out. Daniel's hand finally made contact, cupping her cheek gently. Together. If you want to, I want to. The words came out as barely more than a whisper. I want to try. Then, that's enough. Daniel smiled a real smile, not the professional one he wore at the office. We can start there. Claire leaned into his hand, letting herself experience the simple comfort of being touched with care. Your daughter thinks I'm a superhero. She's not wrong. She offered to share her family with me. That's Daniel's voice caught. That's Emma. She has more heart than any kid should. She gets that from her father. They stood there in the dim living room, close enough to feel each other's warmth, while Emma slept down the hall and the rest of the world continued on without them. What happens now? Claire asked. Now? Daniel's thumb traced her cheekbone. Now you rest, you heal, and when you're ready, when we're both ready, we figure out what comes next. That's not a very detailed plan. I know. He smiled. Must be killing you. Despite everything, Claire laughed. Little bit. Get used to it. Life with Emma and me is rarely planned. I'm not good with chaos. I know. But maybe Daniel's expression softened. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we balance each other out. Claire wanted to kiss him. Wanted it with a sudden, fierce certainty that surprised her. But they were standing in his living room at midnight with his daughter sleeping down the hall. And she had a concussion. And this was all so new and fragile that rushing seemed dangerous. So instead, she said, I should sleep. Doctor's orders. You should. But Daniel didn't step back. Can I? He hesitated. Can I stay here? Just for a bit? Make sure you're okay? You don't have to ask permission to sit in your own living room. I know. But boundaries. We should have them. Claire appreciated that more than he probably realized. Then yes. Stay. Please. She settled back onto the pull-out couch. Daniel returned to the armchair, maintaining physical distance while remaining close enough to talk quietly. Tell me about Laura, Claire said. If you want to. Daniel looked surprised. Why? Because she's part of who you are. Part of what shaped you into the man, Claire stopped. She matters. I want to understand. For the next hour, Daniel talked. About meeting Laura at 19. About their life together. About the kind of mother she'd been. The kind of person who saw goodness in everyone. About the letters she'd left for Emma and the recordings she'd made and the way she'd faced death with grace. She would have liked you, Daniel said eventually. She believed in strong women, in people who fought for what they wanted. I'm not sure I'd measure up to someone like that. You would. Daniel's certainty was absolute. You do. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with Claire. Her eyes grew heavy. Her responses became slower. Sleep, Daniel said gently. I'll be right here. You don't have to. I know. But I will be anyway. Claire let her eyes close. And for the first time in years, she fell asleep knowing someone was watching over her. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. 6 months later, Claire stood in the audience of an elementary school auditorium watching Emma perform in her class's end-of-year presentation. Emma was a talking tree. She had exactly 3 lines and delivered them with the dramatic flair of someone performing Shakespeare. When she spotted Claire in the crowd, her face lit up, and she waved so enthusiastically that her branches nearly knocked over the student beside her. Claire waved back, feeling her chest warm. Daniel stood beside her, their shoulders touching in the crowded auditorium. His hand found hers, and Claire laced their fingers together with an ease that still sometimes surprised her. 6 months since the accident. 6 months since Daniel's confession, and Claire's carefully maintained world shattered and reformed into something new. It hadn't been easy. Daniel had transferred to a different department within the company, eliminating the direct reporting relationship to avoid conflicts of interest. Claire had endured HR meetings and legal reviews and more scrutiny than she'd ever experienced. The board had opinions. Her colleagues had opinions. The business press wrote think pieces about power dynamics and workplace relationships. Claire discovered she didn't care. What she cared about was coming home not to her empty penthouse, which she'd sold 3 months ago, but to Daniel's small apartment that they were now actively looking to replace with something bigger. Something with space for Emma's art and Daniel's books and Claire's need for a home office. Something that felt like family. "She's so proud you're here," Daniel whispered as the presentation continued. She told everyone her dad's girlfriend was coming. Claire felt her throat tighten. She still wasn't used to the label. Girlfriend. It felt too small for what they were building, but also perfectly appropriate for their still developing relationship. "I wouldn't miss it," Claire whispered back, and she wouldn't. Not anymore. She'd reorganized her entire schedule, delegating responsibilities she'd once thought only she could handle, trusting her team in ways she'd never allowed herself before. It turned out the company didn't collapse without her constant oversight. It actually thrived when she wasn't micromanaging every decision. Who knew? After the presentation, Emma ran to them with her construction paper tree branches flapping. "Did you see? Did you see me? You were amazing," Claire said, crouching down to Emma's level. "A very convincing tree. I wanted to be a flower, but they said I was too tall." Emma didn't seem bothered by this. "But trees are cooler anyway. They're strong. Like you," Claire agreed. Emma beamed. Then, without warning, she threw her arms around Claire's neck in a fierce hug. "I'm glad you're here." Claire hugged her back, careful of the cardboard branches. "Me too, sweetheart." Over Emma's shoulder, she saw Daniel watching them with an expression she couldn't quite name. Love, certainly. But also something like wonder, like he still couldn't quite believe this was real. Claire understood. She felt it too. They went for ice cream afterward, a new tradition they'd established. Emma got chocolate with rainbow sprinkles and told them detailed stories about school drama Claire barely followed. Daniel got vanilla and teased Emma about her sugar-induced energy. Claire got strawberry and just listened, soaking in the ordinary magic of being part of something. Later, after Emma was in bed, Claire and Daniel sat on the couch together. Claire had learned to tolerate the cramped space, though she still occasionally argued for that bigger apartment. "She asked me something yesterday," Daniel said quietly. "Emma, what?" "She asked if you were going to be her mom now." Claire's heart stopped. "What did you tell her?" "I told her," Daniel turned to face her. "I told her that families come in all different shapes, that you weren't trying to replace Laura, but that maybe, eventually, you could be something different, something new." How did she respond? She said that was okay, that she had room for both, that love doesn't run out just because you share it. Claire felt tears threatening. "She's very wise." "She is." Daniel took Claire's hand. "But I want you to know there's no pressure, no timeline. We can take this as slow as you need." Claire had been thinking about this, about what she wanted, what she was ready for. "I want to move in together," she said. "Officially. Find a place that's ours, all of ours." Daniel's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Claire squeezed his hand. "I'm tired of half measures, of protecting myself from being hurt. I want to be all in. With you, with Emma, with whatever this becomes. It might get messy," Daniel warned. "Emma's a great kid, but she's still a kid. There will be tantrums and homework battles and phases where she hates everything. I can handle messy. I run a corporation. That's different, maybe." Claire smiled. "But I want to try anyway. I want to learn how to braid hair and help with science projects and be the person Emma waves at during school presentations." "What about work? Your reputation?" "Work is work. It doesn't define me anymore." Claire said it with certainty she hadn't possessed 6 months ago. "You and Emma, you showed me that. Taught me what actually matters." Daniel pulled her closer, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "I love you." Have I mentioned that recently? Not since this morning. Well, I love you. More than I thought possible. More than I probably should after only 6 months. Claire leaned into him. I love you too. The words still felt new, unfamiliar. But they were getting easier each time she said them. Thank you, Daniel said softly, for taking a chance on us. On me. Thank you for not giving up when I was too scared to try. They sat in comfortable silence, the television playing quietly in the background. Emma sleeping down the hall. This was what she'd been missing, Claire realized. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, just this. Quiet evenings with someone who knew her, who chose her, who saw her without the armor and loved her anyway. 3 months later, Claire stood in the kitchen of their new apartment, a 2-bedroom place with actual space and windows that let in real sunlight, making pancakes, while Emma sat at the table doing homework and Daniel organized boxes in the living room. They'd moved in 2 weeks ago. The apartment was still half unpacked, boxes stacked in corners, but it already felt more like home than anywhere Claire had lived. Claire? Emma's voice interrupted her thoughts. How do you spell astronaut? Claire spelled it out, flipping pancakes with the confidence of someone who'd practiced this simple domestic task dozens of times in the past few months. Thanks. We're writing about what we want to be when we grow up. What are you saying? Astronaut or scientist, or maybe a teacher like my mom was. Emma said this matter-of-factly. She talked about Laura often now, having grown comfortable with Claire's presence in her life. What did you want to be when you were little? Claire considered. I don't think I knew. I just knew I wanted to build something important. Did you? I did. I built a company that employs thousands of people. That's cool. Emma went back to her paper, then added, But I think the most important thing you built is being here. With us. Claire's hand stilled on the spatula. Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds came stunning wisdom. You're right, she said softly. This is more important. Daniel appeared in the kitchen doorway, slightly dusty from unpacking. Something smells amazing. Pancakes, almost ready. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. The easy affection still made Claire's heart race, but she'd learned to lean into it rather than pull away. I have something for you, he murmured. Later. After Emma goes to bed, curiosity flickered. A surprise? Sort of. They had breakfast together, pancakes with too much syrup, Emma chattering about school, Daniel making terrible jokes. Normal. Perfect. Everything Claire had never known she needed. That evening, after Emma was tucked in and the kitchen cleaned, Daniel took Claire's hand and led her to the bedroom. From his nightstand, he pulled out a small box. Claire's heart leapt. Daniel, it's not a ring, he said quickly. Not yet. Not because I don't want to, but because, well, we said we'd take our time. He opened the box. Inside was a key, a simple silver key on a chain. It's to the apartment, Daniel explained. I know you already have a key, but this one is different. It's a promise that this is your home, that Emma and I are your family, that you don't have to be alone anymore. Claire's vision blurred. Daniel, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that we're here. We're staying, and whenever you're ready for rings and papers and making it all official, I'll be here for that too. Claire took the key with shaking hands. It was beautiful in its simplicity, a physical reminder that she belonged somewhere. I love you, she whispered. Both of you, so much. We love you too. Daniel pulled her close. Always. Claire wrapped the chain around her neck, feeling the key settle against her heart. It was just a piece of metal, but it represented everything she'd spent 42 years avoiding and the past 9 months learning to embrace. Home, family, love, the things that actually mattered. 2 years after the accident, Claire Whitmore stood in front of her bathroom mirror, adjusting her dress and trying not to panic. You look beautiful, Daniel said from the doorway. Claire turned. He was already dressed in his suit, looking impossibly handsome and slightly nervous himself. "This is crazy," she said. "We're crazy, probably." He crossed to her, taking her hands. "But I don't care." In the living room of their apartment, bigger now, with 3 bedrooms, because they'd decided last year that Emma needed her own space and they wanted to try for another child. Emma was putting final touches on flower arrangements with Claire's mother, who'd flown in from Seattle. Claire's relationship with her family had improved dramatically since meeting Daniel and Emma. Turned out having actual joy in her life made her more willing to let people in. Her mother had cried when Claire introduced Daniel, saying she'd worried Claire would die alone and workaholic. Claire had cried too, admitting she'd worried about the same thing. "I can't believe we're getting married in our living room," Claire said. "You wanted small, intimate." I do." She squeezed his hands. "But Daniel, are you sure? Really sure? I'm still terrible at this. At being domestic and maternal and—" "Stop." Daniel kissed her forehead. "You're not terrible. You're learning. And you're doing great. Emma still prefers you for most things. Emma adores you. She told me last week you're the best thing that ever happened to our family." Claire's eyes welled up. "She did? She did. And she's right." There was a knock at the bedroom door. Emma poked her head in, now 11 years old and somehow even more dramatic than at 8. "Everyone's here. Are you ready?" Claire looked at Daniel, at the man who'd held her hand in an ambulance and confessed his love when he thought she couldn't hear. The man who'd taught her that success meant nothing without people to share it with. "I'm ready," she said. They were married in front of 20 people in their living room, with Emma as the flower girl and maid of honor combined. The ceremony was simple. No elaborate venue, no hundreds of guests, no corporate obligations. Just people they loved. People who mattered. When the officiant pronounced them married, Emma cheered so loudly that everyone laughed. And when Daniel kissed Claire, his wife now, officially and forever, she tasted salt and realized she was crying. Happy tears. The kind she'd never believed she'd experience. At the small reception afterward, while Emma showed off her new dress to Claire's mother and Daniel talked with their neighbors, Claire stood by the window and looked out at the city. She still ran Whitmore Industries, still made tough decisions and pushed for growth. But she did it differently now. She delegated. She took vacations. She left at 5:30 to have dinner with her family. And somehow, the company thrived even more. Daniel appeared beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. Happy? So happy. Claire leaned into him. "Thank you. For what? For not giving up. For seeing past the Ice Queen CEO to the lonely woman underneath. For loving me, even when I didn't know how to love myself. Claire, and thank you for that car accident." Daniel pulled back to look at her, eyebrows raised. "Did you just thank me for a car accident? Well, not the accident itself." But Claire smiled. "If it hadn't happened, I never would have heard you. Never would have known. Never would have taken the risk. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. Maybe not." She turned in his arms. "I was so scared, Daniel. So closed off. It took hearing you confess your love while you thought I was unconscious to crack through all my defenses. Then I guess I'm glad you're a good actress. The best." Claire kissed him softly. "And now I'm the best wife. Debatable, but I'm biased." Emma ran over, grabbing both their hands. "Come on." Gran wants to do a toast. They let Emma pull them back to the celebration. Back to family and laughter and the messy, imperfect, beautiful life they'd built together. Later, after everyone had gone home and Emma was in bed, Claire and Daniel stood together on their small balcony, looking at the city lights. "Do you ever miss it?" Daniel asked. "The old life? The simplicity? No." Claire's answer was immediate and certain. That life was empty. This one. She gestured to the apartment behind them, where their daughter slept and wedding decorations still hung. This one is full, sometimes overwhelming. Often chaotic, but full is good. full is everything. Daniel pulled her close. I love you, Mrs. Hayes. I love you too, Mr. Whitmore Hayes. They'd hyphenated, both taking each other's names. Another compromise in a relationship built on finding balance. You know what the best part is? Claire said. What? I don't have to pretend anymore. Don't have to be the Ice Queen CEO every second. With you, with Emma, I can just be Claire. You were always just Claire to me, Daniel said. From the first interview, I saw past the armor. Then you saw more than I did. They stood together in the darkness, two people who'd found each other through accident and confession and the courage to be vulnerable. Sometimes, Claire thought, the best things in life came after a crash, after the world tilted sideways and everything you thought you knew shattered, after you stopped pretending to be unconscious and opened your eyes to see what love looked like when it was real. And when you finally woke up, truly woke up, you discovered that the person you'd been too scared to love had been loving you all along, waiting, hoping, ready to catch you when you finally fell.